So like I said before, plein air is a movement that was started to loosen up art styles. Basically, all you do is you get your art supplies and you go outside. So I highly recommend taking your shoes off, digging your feet into the dirt, and settling in for a nice, relaxing art lesson. I work in field journals. These are just sketches. They have no intention of becoming a full art piece. They're just there to let me enjoy them. If you do not have watercolors, you can use markers or colored pencils. It's still going to count as plein air. If you are using watercolors, what we're going to do is we're going to start off with one that's going to need some drying time. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with moss. Moss has lots of different greens in there. At first it all looks like the same green, but it's not. If you take a moment to look at everything, you'll see that everything has so many more colors than just green. So to start with our moss, I'm going to show you how I like to do one of my textures. So sometimes I'll wet my paper just a little, and then I get some green, and this is how I always do my moss in my paintings. And instead of doing full brush strokes, I dot. And I like to keep it pretty soggy. Which is why I said we need to start with this one first, because it takes drying time. And I build up my colors. I don't just put my color on there all at once. So once I've got my colors down, take a little bit of salt, and you can start to see the salt suck up that extra moisture. And then, like I said, not everything is just a plain green. There are different shades of green, a little bit of brown, and I like to take a little darker color and again, instead of doing a full brush stroke, I dot it, and I don't dot it everywhere, I just kind of sporadically do it to make the moss have this really nice texture. And again, the salt crystals are starting to soak up that extra moisture. Let's get a little more yellow. There we go. And one of my favorite things about watercolor is it's a lesson in patience. And the reward is great. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my field journal aside and let that dry. And while that's drying, we are going to start on something else. So I grabbed a small branch of white oak that I am assuming a squirrel chewed off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it right here. Let's see. It has a pretty yellow base. And again, if you look at it, you'll start to see different shades of green, some yellows. And I'm not going to use a pencil because again, plein air is all about loosening up a style. Let's see, so it's missing its top. And your leaves are all going to look different because what I want you to do is look at the shapes of the leaf. Now oaks have what are called lobed leaves, and they grow in a cluster. And it looks like this one has seen some battle. So I'm going to make sure I follow those lines. And I'm just going to keep adding random yellows, random greens. I mean, I say they're random, but they're not. I have a game plan for them. Okay, here's my basic shape. It is a beautiful day here in North Carolina, a perfect day for Arbor Day. Perfect day to plant some trees, hug some trees, be with the trees. Now I am just starting to pick out some of the yellows I see, and I'm kind of adding them to my leaf. And again, watercolor is a lesson in patience. But it also gives you a lot of freedoms. And this is why my palette looks like a disaster. It's because I will just work my way around my palette until I find just the right shade. And there we go. Could be a twinge bit more yellow, but we'll work with it. Like I said, our leaves are all going to be different because I want you to take a good look at them, follow their curves, add the colors you see. All right, let's add more of this yellow. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to grab a little piece of my purple willow. And we're not done with this leaf yet. We'll come back to it, but we've got to let it dry before we do the next section. All right, so looking at my purple willow, I'm going to start with the branch, which is kind of a yellowy brown, but it also has a little green in it. There we go. And again, we're just going to follow the shapes. Blues are my personal favorites because there's so many different types. And this one's called a purple willow because the main branches on it are purple. And I can see the leaves kind of have a sagey looking green. And this is the problem with working outside, is the wind can take all your pieces. So I'm just going to put that back up there while I still try and find just the right shade of green. Probably need a little, oh, there it is. Okay. So I'm going to follow my shapes. And like our oak had lobed leaves, willows have elongated leaves. And willows grow in alternating leaves. So while the oak is a cluster, the willow alternates, which means its leaves alternate on the branch. Nature, much like watercolor, is a lesson in patience. And one of my favorite quotes is, "Adopt the pace of nature, for hers is patience." Now I could leave it just like this, but again, I like to build up my colors. So I'm going to make a darker shade. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add it to the base of the leaves and let it go from there. And I'm going to kind of blend in my branch just a little. Okay, there's that. Well, my willow oak wilted because I've had it for a while. But at the top of the willow oak, you can notice that it has a really purpley shade. So, you know, to assume that all trees' bark looks the same or limbs look the same is a misjudgment. There's a little bit of red starting up at the top. And we're going to blend it in with a little bit of brown and let it carry all the way down here. And then it has, you know, just some little buds for the leaves to come out at. Alright, switching back to some green. And it looks like these leaves are a little darker than our white oak. Now for this one, since it's wilty, I am going to improvise which means I'm just going to look at these leaves and add them where I think they should go, because that is very plein air. Also, it helps that I just did the purple willow because the leaves are very similar. Purple willow is just a little shorter. Now the sun is coming out. Be sure to wear sunscreen. And again, I'm going to add some darker green just at the base, kind of let it carry. That's the cool thing about watercolor, is it moves very easily, but you know, sometimes that's also frustrating. My supplies I use is squirrel brush, although it's synthetic, so it's not real squirrel. And then I use a handbook brand field journal. I use Koi watercolors, which are very affordable. I also use P.H. Martin, which is a very liquid watercolor. And my salt is kosher salt. Okay, looks like our white oak is pretty dry, so we'll go with that. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to add veins on my white oak. So I lost my other one, but we'll use this one. So the vein, it's kind of a grayish green. But I'm not going to use black to make a gray. We're just going to kind of muddy it up a bit. The black will overtake it. Let's see how that works. Much like a tree trunk, make it wide at the bottom. I like using swirl brushes because they do a whole variety of things. Sometimes it's a little hard to control, but the outcome turns out really neat because you can still get interesting line quality even though you're painting. So this is essentially what plein air is. Looking at nature, being in nature, embracing how different everything is. And so I like to keep this kind of loose and nice, and I'm not going to do anything else to it except add a date. Now I'm going to check on my moss. Still needs some drying time. But once you get it dried, you will just rub the salt off, and what you will get are these really cool little salt crystals. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add more variation of green to make the moss look close and far away at the same time. So that is our lesson on plein air, and it is Arbor Day, so happy Arbor Day. Hug some trees, draw some trees, hang out with some trees. Yeah, so happy Arbor Day, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.